lady's recognized.
If the gentlelady wants to hear from Hunter Biden, we can hear from him right now, Mr. Chairman. Let's take a vote and hear from Hunter Biden. What are you afraid of?
Hold on. Order.
Are women allowed to speak in here or no? Are women allowed to speak in here or no? Because you keep interrupting me.
I'll interrupt the chairman. I don't know that he's a lady.
I think that Hunter Biden should be arrested right here, right now, and go straight to jail. Our nation is founded on the rule of law.
Come on.
And the premise that the law applies equally to everyone, no matter what your last
Point of order,
name
Mr. Chairman. Point of order.
It doesn't matter who you are.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Biggs over here.
Donald Trump Jr.
Biggs over here.
State your point, Mr. Biggs.
Yeah, my point of order is this. Are we going to continue on with this blatant interruption? This is absurd and inappropriate. I intend to give my statement. I don't intend to have anybody interrupted. I'm not going to interrupt your statements. I think you should have decorum and courtesy and don't act like a bunch of nimrods.
You just interrupted a woman.
And that's 5,
I got permission.
Can we agree everyone has
Mr.
5
Chairman,
minutes? Can we agree?
Point of order again. The assertion that I interrupted was absolutely false. That's typical of the gentleman who spoke it. I got permission to speak from the chairman. I spoke. I was interrupted yet again by the gentleman who doesn't choose to go through the chair and follow proper order. I encourage us, I think if we're going to have any respect at all, we need to have proper decorum.
Well said.
I'd like to finish.
The rules are everyone's going to be recognized for 5 minutes. Anyone that wants to be recognized will be recognized for 5 minutes. Ms. Mace has 4 minutes and 13 seconds left. Chair recognizes Ms. Mace.
It does not matter who you are, where you come from, or who your father is, or your last name. Yes, I'm looking at you, Hunter Biden, as I'm speaking to you. You are not above the law at all. The facts in this case are crystal clear. This committee used and issued a lawful subpoena to Hunter Biden, a critical witness in this committee's investigation into Biden family corruption. Hunter Biden and his lawyers did not claim privilege of any kind because clearly he has none. They didn't contest the legitimacy of our reasons for issuing this subpoena, no reasons, because they clearly are legitimate. And yet, he refused to comply. Trump's family members, Don Trump Jr., he did not defy a congressional subpoena. He showed up multiple times for multiple depositions for several hours. In doing so, Hunter Biden broke the law. He did so deliberately. You did so flagrantly. You showed up on the Hill, on the Senate side, the day of that congressional subpoena to defy it and spit in the face of this committee. That's what you did. The question the American people are asking us is, what is Hunter Biden so afraid of? Why can't you show up for a congressional deposition? You're here for a political stunt. This is just a PR stunt to you. This is just a game that you are playing with the American people. You're playing with the truth. Hunter Biden wasn't afraid to sell access to Joe Biden to the highest bidder when he was in elected office. He wasn't afraid to trade on the Biden brand, peddle influence, and share those ill-gotten gains with members of his family, including Joe Biden. He wasn't afraid to compromise the integrity of the presidency and vice presidency by involving Joe Biden in shady business deals with our foreign adversaries. But Hunter Biden, you were too afraid to show up for a deposition, and you still can't today. I believe that Hunter Biden should be held completely in contempt. I think he should be hauled off to jail right now, because it wasn't long ago, too, my friends on the other side of the aisle, that you also believed in the power of a congressional subpoena. Not long ago at all. You believed in holding those who refuse to comply with congressional subpoena accountable. And I stood with each and every one of you. I am the only member in this room today who has held a member of my own party in contempt of Congress for not showing up for a subpoena. And I see nothing but complete hypocrisy on the other side of the aisle. The ranking member of this committee even so eloquently put it, the lesson is, please tell your children out there in America, if you get a subpoena to go before Congress, go. You have a legal responsibility to do so. So the hypocrisy is stunning. What are we to tell our children today? There's nothing the other side can say with a straight face. As the only member of this committee to vote to hold a member of contempt of my own party, let me be clear, this should not be a partisan issue. If Congress issues a subpoena, you show up, period. This is not a responsibility we take lightly. It brings no joy for us to do this, but the president's son broke the law and must be held accountable in the same way anybody else would. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to do so. And my last message to you, Hunter Biden, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes.
Will the gentlelady yield for a question? Will the gentlelady yield? Will my friend yield from South Carolina?
Sure.
I do want to commend the gentlelady who was the only Republican who stood up and voted to hold in contempt the Republican members of the House who blatantly and categorically refused to comply with subpoenas that came from the bipartisan January 6th committee. I would like to ask my friend, Ms. Mace from South Carolina, whether she's aware of all the case law which says that the committee has to engage in good faith interaction with the witnesses they've called, and they're supposed to arrive at a solution. And what do you think about the fact that the chairman on multiple occasions gave this witness the opportunity to come before the full committee, and he agreed to that?
We issued a congressional subpoena, and I know with your constitutional law background, you know exactly what that means, and he should have showed up. And because of your vote and because of your statements, you should be voting to hold this man in contempt of Congress today, right now, if you're going to be consistent on your own policies and your own words.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Moskowitz for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you after a long break. So I'm listening to the gentlelady from South Carolina about the witness being afraid to come in front of the committee. It's interesting. He's here. He doesn't seem to be too afraid. In fact, for some reason, the chairman, who on multiple occasions invited the witness to come on TV, so apparently the chairman wants to pretend like his statements on television or in interviews don't matter, but it didn't happen once, it didn't happen twice, it happened multiple times. The chairman said the witness can choose whether to come to a deposition or to a public hearing in front of the committee. The witness accepted the chairman's invitation. It just so happens the witness is here. If the committee wants to hear from the witness and the chairman gave the witness that option, then the only folks that are afraid to hear from the witness with the American people watching are my friends on the other side of the aisle. I don't know if there's a proper motion, Mr. Chairman, but I'll make a motion. Let's vote. Let's take a vote. Who wants to hear from Hunter right now, today? Anyone? Come on. Who wants to hear from Hunter?
Motion's out of order. Yeah.
No one. So I'm a visual learner, and the visual is clear. Nobody over there wants to hear from the witness. Oh, there's one. Thank you.
Will you yield for a question?
I'm not there yet, but I will eventually. So there's no one, well, other than one or two, that want to hear from the witness. So the majority of my colleagues over there, including the chairman, don't want to hear from the witness with the American people watching. So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to hear from you. Will you acknowledge that you invited the witness on television to choose whether he could come to a public hearing? And do you stand by your words, or do you renege that invitation to the witness?
To answer the question, I've said repeatedly, after the deposition, Mr. Biden can come in front of a public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to play the video, but that is not what you said on television multiple times. We have the quotes. We can put them up. You said the witness can choose between a deposition.
Listen, Mr. Moskowitz, Mr. Biden doesn't make the rules. We make the
rules. No, Mr. Chairman, you make the rules. And the rule you made is that he can choose.
The rule is...
Those were your words, reclaiming my time.
He was issued 2 lawful subpoenas.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman. No, you issued those subpoenas after he took you up on your invitation to come, and then you were like, oh, no, oh, my God, what did I do? I invited him to come so the American people can hear his side of the story. I put my foot in my mouth, so now I must bury him in the basement where we can decide what we're going to release to the public so that we can continue to tell that story. Mr. Chairman, you have said multiple times that this is not about Hunter. It's about Joe Biden. And even this morning on Mornings with Maria, She asked another simple question, the question you have been asked multiple times, which is, do you have evidence to impeach the President of the United States? Before, you said, I hope so. Today, you said, I think so. And the answer is, you don't. And you still don't. And so we continue to be here and have these charades. To my colleagues who talk about lawful subpoenas, I appreciate the gentlelady from South Carolina who voted to hold people in contempt. Listen, I'll make this bipartisan. I'll vote for the Hunter contempt today. You can get my vote. You can get my vote. But I want you to show the American people that you're serious. Here is the subpoena to Representative Scott Perry, who did not comply. I'd like to enter this into the record. Here is the subpoena to Mark Meadows. I'd like to enter this into the record, who did not comply. Here is the subpoena to Jim Jordan, who did not comply with a lawful subpoena. I'd like to enter that into the record. Here is the subpoena to Mo Brooks, who did not comply. I'd like to enter that into the record. Here is the subpoena to Mr. Biggs, who did not comply. I'd like to enter that into the record. And here's the subpoena to Mr. McCarthy, who did not comply. I'd like to enter that into the record. There's an amendment coming to add some of those names into the contempt order. You vote to add those names and show the American people that we apply the law equally, not just when it's Democrats, right? It's a crime when it's Democrats, but when it's Trump and the Republicans, it's just fine. No, show that you're serious and that everyone is not above the law. Vote for that amendment, and I'll vote for the Hunter Biden contempt. I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair recognizes Ms. Green from Georgia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, Hunter. Apparently you're afraid of my words.
Whoa! Oh.
I'd like to reclaim my time, Mr. Chairman.
Burst their bubble. Wow, that's too bad.
I think it's clear and obvious for everyone watching this hearing today that Hunter Biden is terrified of strong conservative Republican women because he can't even face my words as I was about to speak to him. What a coward. And this is also a coward that sat right here in front of Mickey Babbitt, Ashley Babbitt's mother, who was murdered on January 6th by Michael Byrd, the Capitol police officer. And you want to talk about a committee, a political sham? I'll totally disagree with you, Ms. Mace. That January 6th committee was not bipartisan. It was a complete setup to go after President Trump, go after Republicans, go after anyone that believes in free and fair elections, people that believe the Department of Justice should be fair and balanced, not a political weaponized department of the federal government that is targeting President Trump, his supporters, people that walked in the Capitol on January 6th, and now people that stood outside the Capitol. There's been no justice for Ashley Babbitt's family. Michael Byrd has never been charged with anything. He was let off, and he was given a promotion and allowed to walk free. And Hunter Biden just walked out. That is an example of not following the law. Hunter Biden thinks he's above the law. Don Jr., Eric Trump, Ivanka, Trump family members had to come in to Democrat subpoenas and be questioned by Democrats for over 8 hours, each of them. Hunter Biden runs away. Hunter Biden did not come when we subpoenaed him. He did not follow the law. And then one of our colleagues helped him evade his subpoena by going and reserving a press conference for him on his behalf, helped him evade the subpoena, helped Hunter Biden break the law. Let's talk about his own father's words. President Joe Biden said in October 2021 that individuals who defy subpoenas from the January 6th House Select Committee should be prosecuted. And the Justice Department indicted Steve Bannon for doing so in November 2021. Hunter Biden's father, the President of the United States, said that he should be prosecuted. Anyone that defies a subpoena should be prosecuted. Hunter Biden didn't show up for his subpoena. Hunter Biden showed up today to make a clown show of himself, to show that he is nothing but someone that will not obey the law, that wants to show up when he wants to, and sits here with a smug look on his face and runs away when it's my turn to talk. Not only is he a criminal, but he is a coward. Nothing but a coward. Let's talk about voting for things. We have members on this committee that are on record on their own Twitter accounts talking about people blowing off subpoenas on the January 6th committee that states the rule of law is stirring all over America. That's Representative Jamie Raskin. Right here, I'll enter this for the record. Representative Jamie Raskin. Steve Bannon has been convicted of acting in contempt of Congress. My argument with Rep. Gates is now settled. If subpoenaed, you show up and assert any privilege you think applies to specific questions, but you can't blow off the proceeding. He blew it off. Walking in today is too late. We have to hold Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress because he's not above the law, and neither is the President of the United States. And this committee has produced more evidence that any Democrat ever dreamed of having against President Trump and his family, while they constantly make up lies and attacks about the Trump family and President Trump. They make them up all day long. It's nothing but a political witch hunt. This committee has produced the evidence that Joe Biden has taken payments through his son, Hunter Biden, and all their dozens of fake LLCs. You can't buy a Biden product. You can't hire a Biden for a service unless you're a foreign country and you're asking and paying for political favors and political payouts. And that is exactly what the Biden brand is all about. We will hold Hunter Biden in contempt. And if the Democrats are not the hypocrites that they constantly display that they are, then they will vote for contempt of Congress because they voted for it on every other subpoena that didn't go through. And here's the last thing. You guys had your chance. If you wanted to hold people in contempt of Congress, you could have done it last Congress, but you didn't do it, and it would have been a major mistake because you know that it could have been turned exactly back on you. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's really interesting to hear the gentlelady from Georgia speak about Hunter Biden leaving, and she is the person that showed nude photos of Hunter Biden in this very committee room, showing dick pics in this committee room of Hunter Biden. I have my 5 minutes, gentlelady, and so I think it's really ironic, hypocritical. Quite shameful that the person who's complaining about somebody leaving when she's showing nude photos of him to this committee, showing nude photos of him to this committee in this very room. And you also talk about decorum. You're talking about January 6th. Ms. Green, I was there with you when we went to the January 6th jail, and when you were hugging, high-fiving, talking to and providing so much comfort and joy to the insurrectionists that attacked our Capitol. And you were insurrectionists that attacked our Capitol. You were hugging and giving them all the support.
Mr. Chairman, the gentleman has
Chair,
time.
Stop the clock. Chair recognizes Mr. Garcia.
I'd like to continue my
3 minutes and 50 seconds.
5 minutes. And I just want to remind everyone, that this is, again, about the Donald Trump revenge show. We're here today, and the majority is doing this hearing because this is all about Donald Trump and trying to make sure they do everything they can to support him. For weeks, we as Democrats and Republicans and the chairman demanded a public hearing, and I agree with Mr. Moskowitz. Yet, Mr. Chairman, you have denied it. We want a public hearing. If we need to take a vote or ask unanimous consent, we should hear from Mr. Biden today. That's what the public demands. Democrats are united. We like to see the same thing. And I'd like to see a vote to actually have Hunter Biden actually, with unanimous consent, do actually a hearing and address us today, if possible.
Would my friend yield?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, the fact of the matter is Mr. Biden showed up this morning and was willing to show up weeks ago to appear at a public hearing, which he was led to believe was his option. And today is all about a combination of chutzpah and delusional theory. We just heard some of the delusional theory from the gentlelady from Georgia. But the chutzpah is a bunch of people who defied subpoenas themselves now want to have a contempt citation for the son of the president because they don't have sufficient evidence. In fact, they have no evidence of any kind to pursue the president himself. So when you can't go after the principal, try to hurt the people around him, including a wounded member of his own family who has had all too public troubles put before our country. It's mean-spirited, it's cruel, and it's beneath the dignity of this committee and this body. If you want to have political differences with the President of the United States, our system invites it. But resorting to punitive measures against members of his family because you can't get at him, I think crosses a boundary. And by the way, I counseled Democrats in the previous administration to take great care in going after members of President Trump's family because I felt the same dynamic at work. So I would urge that we give real serious consideration to the matter at hand, that we show more respect for the president and his family, whoever that president may be at any given time, and that we respect due process and we hold ourselves to the same standard we are asking this body to act on today in terms of a contempt citation. We've let many of our fellow members off the hook in defying the January 6 subpoenas. I yield to Mr. Raskin.
15 seconds.
Can I have the rest of my time? I just want to also, Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Biden has agreed to address this committee publicly. I just want to ask unanimous consent to swear in Mr. Biden either today or at a future meeting, and have every member be able to ask 5 minutes of questioning to the witness. So I'd like to officially ask that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, we object. That's not in order.
How is that not in order?
It's just not in order. Time's expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Perry for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to remind members of this committee and anybody watching that this is a duly constituted committee under the rules of the House of Representatives. Duly constituted. You see Republicans on this side and Democrats on that side. The Democrats on that side were selected by their leadership and their process. Same thing for the Republicans on this side. Why do I mention that? Why do I bring that up? Because this is a stark difference from what is being referenced on the other side of the aisle. The so-called J6 committee, which was nothing more than a Soviet show trial in America. That's what that was. And so every single action that they took, subpoenaing people, disparaging people, referring charges of people, were not legitimate. Were not legitimate. So to compare what's happening today to what happened years ago is completely out of context, and you need to understand that. This is a game for these folks. Sure, they want to support their guy. They don't care about America. They don't care about what the president's doing to destroy America. They're just locking horns, locking arms to support their guy. And God bless them, they can do that. If you want to vote for people that do that, that's your right. Now, in my opinion, this committee is not interested in prosecuting Hunter Biden. We're not interested in that. Hunter Biden is a sad tale by his own right, by his own admission, by leaving his evidence all around for everybody to see. The other side complains that documents and photographs are shown in this committee about Hunter Biden. Don't blame the person that showed the documents or the photographs. The person that committed the acts is the person who is responsible for the acts. And we do take no joy because it's a waste of time to prosecute Hunter Biden. But he created this for himself, along with the rest of his sad tale of his life, unfortunate that it may be. But we, in this committee, on both sides of the aisle, on behalf of the American people, are charged with finding the facts. And the facts show that President Biden profited from his name, and the person that arranged the deals was Hunter Biden. And so we would like to delve into that. Now, Hunter Biden, regardless of his last name, even though he thinks he's special, he thinks he can leave evidence all around and blame it on the Russians when he knows it was him. He can go on TV and say that he thinks he's special because his last name's Biden and that no one will touch him. Ladies and gentlemen, the great thing about America is that we're all special because the law is blind to each one of us regardless of our station, our economic position, or our political position. Hunter Biden sadly chose to violate federal law. That's unfortunate. But we are duty-bound to do something about it because without law, we have anarchy. And that's what Hunter Biden would like. By coming here today, he shows that he can be here. He shows that he displays that he could show up to a lawfully, legitimately presented subpoena. But he chooses not to, and that's his choice. He can do that. But there are consequences for that, ladies and gentlemen. There are consequences for that. And we are duty-bound.
Will the gentleman yield down here, Mr. Perry?
I will not yield. We are duty-bound. We are duty-bound to pursue the consequences of that so that the American people can trust in the system of justice in the United States of America, which they do not right now. They don't trust in it, nor should they, because this side of the aisle has made a mockery of it for the last 3 years and beyond that.
Will the gentleman yield for?
I will not yield. Mr. Biden is not special. He was given a subpoena. He should have appeared. He chose not to. We have no choice. We have no choice if we are to uphold our oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. We have no choice except to refer charges and find Hunter Biden in contempt. His choice. That was his choice. Now we have to make our choice. And conflating the so-called J6 committee, unduly authorized, not a committee, no jurisdiction, no authority whatsoever under the law of anything. To conflate that with these proceedings today is an abomination. My friends on the other side of the aisle know what they're doing, should be ashamed, should be embarrassed, but will not be. Regardless, we must forge on for the sake of this republic. I yield the balance.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes Mr. Goldman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel like I'm in Alice in Wonderland after that. Every American receives the same application of the law, and it does not matter what your last name is. So I guess that means if your last name is Perry, that subpoenas apply to you as well, lawful subpoenas. Now, I appreciate the gentleman from Pennsylvania's argument that the January 6th committee was not a duly constituted committee, and in fact, he and many others made that same argument to a number of courts of law. The courts are charged with interpreting our laws and whether a committee is a duly constituted committee and whether a subpoena is a duly constituted subpoena. And even though my friend from Pennsylvania may not like the fact that a neutral judge, multiple judges in fact, didn't agree with him, it still remains the law of the land, not what Mr. Perry says, not how I would interpret the January 6th committee, but how every single court of law interpreted it and said it was a validly constituted committee, and every single subpoena issued by that committee was a duly authorized lawful subpoena, no different than the subpoena to Hunter Biden.
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
No, unfortunately, sir, you did not yield to me, so I will not yield to you. The fact of the matter is that subpoenas should apply equally. And for my colleagues to actually claim that we on this side of the aisle are hypocritical because we will not vote to hold someone who has made every effort to comply in every way other
then the specific means of providing the evidence somehow should be held in contempt when 3 members of this committee refuse to comply in any way, shape, or form with a court-determined lawful subpoena is beyond me. Now, I find it interesting that my friend from Pennsylvania also chastises us for just supporting our guy. And I wonder how he would define supporting our guy. Would he define supporting our guy as trying to instigate a coup at the Department of Justice to install a lackey and remove the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General so that he could keep his guy in office even though he lost? Is that just supporting our guy? Because that's what Mr. Perry did. The reality is that we are here because, plain and simple, 2 reasons: retribution for Donald Trump and the fact that the Republicans have no evidence. And you will hear them talk about evidence. You will hear them say, we have so much evidence, we have so much evidence. And we're going to get into some of these details as we go forward. But the reality is that you have been moving the goalposts the entire time because you cannot make any connection, notwithstanding all of your false statements, to the president. So instead, let's subpoena Hunter Biden. Because what we will expect is that he won't testify, or that he'll take the Fifth Amendment because he's under criminal indictment. And then we get to say, aha, all of our specious allegations must be true, because if they weren't, he would come here and testify. Well, he called your bluff, and now you're scrambling.
Will the gentleman yield to a question?
No, I will not. And now you're scrambling.
You sure?
Now you are desperate to find anything to divert attention away from your abject lack of evidence connecting President Biden to any business venture of Hunter Biden's, to any wrongdoing. So we're going to hold us here on a contempt hearing because you don't want to see him testify in public. You just want to be able to filter his testimony in closed-door testimony as you have been doing this entire Congress.
Will the gentleman yield?
I will yield to my ranking member. Thank you.
Thank you. The District Court for the District of Columbia, Judge Kelly, obliterated the argument that Mr.
Time's expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the risk of taking the bait, which is all this is, it's laying a little bait and might be just too attractive for me, so I got to get in on it, maybe just a little bit. I'm intrigued by the assertions of my colleagues who claim that the Hunter Biden violation of the subpoena scenario is the same as issuing subpoenas to 4 members of Congress. I'm intrigued by that. I really am. It's interesting. Had the illegitimate J6 group decided to enforce its dubious subpoena against me, my counsel was prepared to argue that service of that subpoena was insufficient. And so asserted to counsel for the J6 committee. Had the illegitimate J6 gaggle sought to enforce its subpoenas, my counsel, and I believe the counsel of each member of Congress who had been subpoenaed, ostensibly subpoenaed, putatively subpoenaed, would also have asserted successfully a privilege under the Constitution of the United States. Those questions never arose formally because the now defunct J6 committee, which has no authority anymore because it passed with the closing of the last session of Congress. I think that cabal surely understood that its tenuous claims, how tenuous its claims were, and chose not to try and enforce its questionable subpoenas. And why do I say that? I say it because in reporting to Reuters, the committee's own chairman, Benny Thompson, said this, quote, "There are some questions of whether we have the authority to compel testimony from Republican colleagues." He knew you didn't have that authority, but yet you still tried to assert it. Now, what's the distinction? Well, Hunter Biden has no claim to insufficiency of service of process. Why do we know? Because he stood on the lawn of the Senate the same day that he was supposed to be here and asserted publicly, hey, I'm supposed to be somewhere else. I'm supposed to be giving a deposition, but I won't do it. I won't do it. Secondly, Hunter Biden has claimed no privilege against testifying before this committee or the Judiciary Committee pursuant to the subpoena, except for the privilege that he has claimed throughout his life. And as the LA Times said about Hunter Biden, quote, Biden is still on the nepotism gravy train, close quote. As the Daily Mail reported, quote, Hunter admits he got $50,000 a month job on the board of Ukrainian gas company Burisma because of his family name, close quote. And it goes on and on. Again, the LA Times describes Hunter Biden as a, quote, child of privilege, close quote. That's the only privilege Hunter Biden has ever asserted. He asserts that not that he should be exempt from testifying because there is some constitutional proscription, that even the chairman of this committee would agree to, as Benny Thompson agreed to on the J6 committee's issuance of subpoenas to members of Congress. No, he doesn't assert that kind of privilege. He asserts only the privilege that he does not need to come and testify before the United States Congress, who has issued him a subpoena. His attorneys acknowledge that subpoena, and he personally has acknowledged that subpoena for the simple reason that he is a Biden. So, where are we? Merrick Garland has authorized pursuing Republicans for contempt of Congress. He must also authorize prosecution of Hunter Biden. Failure to do so on the part of the Attorney General will show his contempt for Congress as well. But it will show even greater contempt for the American people who now recognize the weaponization of the federal government and the two-tier system promulgated by Democrats. Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Thompson's, to former Chairman Thompson's questioning of his own authority to actually issue subpoenas to members of Congress, Chairman Jordan requested legal analysis and authorities, but Chairman Thompson never responded. That committee could have pursued contempt if they thought there was valid subpoenas issued and a contemptible, warranted contempt citation. They chose not to. Their authority expired, and ours is not expired. We should issue contempt. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 3 names: Jordan, Perry, and Biggs. Not a law firm. 3 members of this body who defied a legitimately issued subpoena upheld by courts of law. I think it's really important to remember that when the word hypocrisy is thrown around by some of our friends on the other side of the aisle. The other thing I think that's really important, before I yield to the ranking member, Mr. Biden, Hunter Biden, knows that if he appeared in camera and in secret to be deposed, Republicans would cherry pick what he said and leak it. He preferred sunshine. He preferred to come here out in the open and testify before the entire American public, this body, and everyone watching, and take his chances with public testimony that could not be used to his detriment by cherry picking and distortion. That is and ought to be the right of an American citizen. I yield to the ranking member.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Conley. I wanted to introduce for the record, Mr. Chairman, United States District Court for the District of Columbia opinion in RNC versus Nancy Pelosi, rendered by Judge Tim Kelly, rejecting, obliterating, and demolishing every argument that we heard from Mr. Perry and Mr. Biggs. Their whole argument seems to be that Republicans were entitled to blow off subpoenas of the United States Congress that came from the January 6th committee because they didn't like the committee. They didn't think it was legitimate. They thought it was not validly authorized. The courts roundly and uniformly rejected those arguments. So now they purport to render the law for themselves. If they don't want to comply with the subpoena, they won't, and yet they would now hold other witnesses like Hunter Biden to a standard they won't accept for themselves. That's a remarkable thing. I started off this hearing, Mr. Chairman, by saying we believe that everybody should respond in good faith to the subpoenas of the United States Congress. Now, Mr. Biden asserts that he responded in good faith to what you repeatedly publicly asked him to do. And he's at least got an arguable, colorable claim that that's true. All the case law I've been able to read, Mr. Chairman, suggests that the committee is supposed to engage in good faith negotiation with witnesses, which is precisely what the January 6th committee did. The dates don't always work out. The times don't always work out. Some people want to assert a privilege. Some people don't. There are certain questions that are agreed to or not. So there are negotiations. But as I read at the beginning of this
Will
hearing,
the gentleman take a question?
but I will as soon as I get to that.
Excuse me, it's my time.
Oh.
Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. Conley. Why is the committee not engaged in that negotiation with Hunter Biden? I just don't understand that. I mean, he's a guy who appears to be 99% willing to do what you even asked him to do in the written subpoena, but he's given 100% good faith compliance with what you repeatedly publicly challenged him to do. So I don't understand why you won't meet with them and work it out, which is what every court in the land has said. The courts don't want to be involved in all this stuff, especially when you've got a guy like him who's overwhelmingly complying with what you're asking for, unlike all of these colleagues on the other side of the aisle who unfortunately 100% defied the subpoenas of the United States Congress, which is what they did. And I don't think those people should be able to vote on any subpoena relating to any witness in this committee until they render cooperation with the January 6th committee and come forth and tell us what they know. Now, there's another point that I need to make, and I want to thank Mr. Connolly for his indulgence here. Our good friend, the gentlelady from Georgia, referred to the murder of Ashley Babbitt. Well, the Department of Justice, the United States Attorney, and the U.S. Capitol Police Inspector General all rejected the idea that there was any
Point
murder.
of order, Mr. Chairman. Or inquiry.
There's no such thing.
There's never been a court hearing.
Mr. Chairman, we agreed.
Michael Byrd was never charged.
Reclaiming order here. The time is Mr. Conley's. I yield back to Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But I will submit for the record a document entitled Department of Justice Closes Investigation into the Death of Ashley Babbitt. United States Capitol Police document USCP completes internal investigation into the January 6th officer-involved shooting. I think it was a scandal. It was a tragedy that people died because Donald Trump put them at risk, as many of the former insurrectionists are now willing to say publicly, that he said you got to go and you got to fight and fight like hell, or you will not have
time's expired,
anymore.
Mr. Conley's
so,
time's expired.
I'm sorry
Mr.
that
Conley's
people lost
time
their
is
lives.
expired. Mr. Conley's time is expired. Order.
I was trying to reclaim the time the gentlelady stole from me.
Oh, we stopped the clock. I watched it. I'm paying close attention. I do feel compelled to respond to this. We have engaged in good faith negotiations. We've offered every witness a narrow scope of topics, documents in advance. They can choose the date. Hunter Biden's lawyer has not engaged with the committee regarding Hunter Biden. Chair now recognizes Mr.
Did you respond
Waltz,
to their
our
letters
newest
to
member,
offer to
for 5
cooperate,
minutes.
sir? Mr. Chairman, did you respond to the lawyer's offer to cooperate with the committee and meet with the committee?
Do what? Yeah, Chair recognizes Mr. Waltz for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an incredible first hearing with this committee.
Welcome to the Oversight Committee.
It was, but I mean, this was entirely predictable. I think what we were going to hear and see today. We saw that Hunter came and staged a PR stunt with my friend from Florida, Mr. Moskowitz. That was clearly organized and recognized, but what I'm hearing from the ranking member and his colleagues that claim that transcripts are subject to, quote, partisan and twisted leaks and distortions is incredibly rich. Let's talk about calling the kettle black first. The country suffered through an entire impeachment proceeding of a president of the United States because of a false dossier in a SCIF, a compartmented facility where every hearing and every transcript started with, this is an unclassified proceeding, then to have it selectively leaked and lied to the American people to the great damage to this nation, but then bring it to this committee because I'm new. I watched yesterday as committee Democrats continued to spin false narratives, several of which went out just yesterday as interviews were ongoing with Hunter Biden's art dealer, which is rich in and of itself. That Congressman Golden on the other side of the aisle went to the press during the interviews and spun a narrative while it was going on, but he conveniently omitted that 70% of the art buyers were Biden donors. So we can go down the line and talk
That's
about
false,
spin.
Sir. That's not the facts.
But the other thing that we're hearing today, well, member so-and-so, Congressman so-and-so, Congressman Jordan, they didn't comply with their subpoenas. But let's have a quick lesson on the Constitution. Article 1, Section 6 of the Constitution, the Speech and Debate Clause, essentially protects all of us from abiding by each other's subpoenas. Otherwise, this body would do nothing but subpoena each other. So I would encourage my colleagues to look up Article 1, Section 6 and look at the case law of the Speech and Debate Clause and why my colleagues rightfully did not abide by that subpoenas. But let's talk about precedent for a moment of a president's son abiding by lawful subpoenas of the Congress. Donald Trump Jr. came before this body. He came before the House Intelligence Committee. He came before the House Judiciary Committee. He came before the Senate Intelligence Committee twice. He came before the so-called Jan 6 Committee, all behind closed doors where lawyers can sit down, both sides of the aisle, and have a conversation, go through documents, all under oath, which is the precedent for any committee. Don Jr. came before committees and came before this body 5 times behind closed doors. What is Hunter Biden afraid of? What won't he do? And Ranking Member Raskin, you're going to reap what you sow, my friend. You insisted on depositions for those who appeared before the Jan 6 committee when Steve Bannon agreed to testify publicly. You argued, sir, that he should have to sit for a closed-door interview, just like every other witness. Quote, the way we have treated every single witness is the same. They come in behind closed doors. They talk to the committee there. You said on an interview in front of CBS in 2022, but now that Republicans are doing the same process, following House rules, doing the investigating, somehow Hunter Biden, because he's a Biden, should be held to a different standard. At the end of the day, we had a government official and the President of the United States, a vice president, set up 30 shell companies. Why? What product did those companies sell? Nothing. Vice President Biden was charged with 2 countries in his portfolio, China and Ukraine. While the vice president, his son, traveled on official business on Air Force 2 and received massive monetary contributions afterwards. We have laws in place, colleagues, that prevent foreign powers from influencing government officials. Were policies changed as a result of the dinners, the calls, the text messages that we know President Biden engaged in through his son? We have a duty to get to the bottom of it. We will reference this contempt, and we will see if the Attorney General will uphold a fair standard of the law.
The time's up, Mr. Chairman.
And prosecute Hunter Biden.
Time's
Thank you, Mr.
expired.
Chairman.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Crockett for 5 minutes.
Okay, all right. So we love the Constitution today, and we also want to talk about foreign money coming in. Have y'all seen the report that was just produced where this chairman decided that he was going to block this committee from receiving additional information about y'all's guy, Trump, and all the money that he took? From what we did receive, we know that Trump got almost $6 million that we can account for, and we know that there's more there. From China specifically, we found almost $8 million total that he accepted from foreign governments while he was serving as the president of these United States. But we're concerned about the president's son who has not been involved in his administration. I just want to run it back, though, to the very beginning, because this is something that I just can't get over. I can't get over the gentle lady from South Carolina talking about white privilege. It was a spit in the face, at least of mine as a black woman, for you to talk about what white privilege looks like, especially from that side of the aisle. And let me quote your now ousted speaker and what he had to say about the Republican Party and y'all's lack of diversity. When you look at the Democrats, they actually look like America. When I look at my party, we look like the most restrictive country club in America. So let me tell you something. Y'all don't know what white privilege looks like, but I'm gonna show you a little bit of something. You see, you want to talk about a two-tier justice system, and this is the only time that y'all have ever referenced it, when this country has a history when it comes to black and brown folk of having two separate sets of rules. And right now what you want to do is have two separate sets of rules because Mr. Moskowitz offered y'all a fair situation. He said he would vote for Hunter to be held in contempt if y'all voted to hold all, even if you remove all of the members of Congress. There's still other people that y'all haven't decided that y'all have excuses for, but y'all don't want to hold them in contempt. But for some reason, it makes sense to hold Hunter Biden in contempt, who has tried to comply. And let me tell you why nobody wants to talk to y'all behind closed doors, because y'all lie. That's just the bottom line. You have done it thus far in this investigation. You have done it this far as it relates to this committee. In every single hearing, y'all spin. I don't know how y'all are still standing right now, because you should be quite dizzy from all the spinning that you're constantly doing when it comes to spinning the truth. You talk about free and fair elections, but you back a guy who we know tried to steal the election. And this isn't about what Democrats have to say. Let me remind you, for those of you that don't know how the justice system works, it's not a matter of the president went in and indicted Trump, but we are talking about grand juries. Grand juries are comprised of American citizens, and the people that have entered pleas of guilty that will be flipping on your leader in a minute, they are Republicans. I do want to point that out. And half of them were Republicans that were handpicked by Donald Trump himself. So, to be clear, whatever happens to your little leader, it's going to be because of the actions that he took. So you can talk all you want to about how January 6th was nonsense, but all of y'all were running at that time. Y'all were grabbing y'all's gas masks, and y'all were running to your offices because you didn't know if they were coming to kill you. You should have cared that somebody was there to protect you, but instead you want to play games because you found out that it was your leader that decided that he wanted to propagate an insurrection on our country. So don't tell me that you care about the Constitution, because you don't. All you care about is Trump getting reelected, and I'll yield the last of my time to my leader.
Thank you very much, Ms. Crockett, for your eloquent and powerful and irrefutable remarks. I'd like to just add a couple of points to what you've said. On January 6th, Senator Ted Cruz described it as terrorism. They later came to attack him during their revisionist, Orwellian, Stalinist attempt to rewrite history. Unfortunately for them, we know that there were 147 or 48 of our officers who were wounded, bloodied, and hospitalized by the rabid mob that beset the Capitol that day. We know that Kevin McCarthy, one of their deposed leaders over on their side, called Donald Trump from his office to complain about how his people were storming the Capitol and putting people's lives in danger. And Donald Trump said, no, those aren't my people, those are Antifa. And McCarthy corrected him and said, no, those are your people, Mr. President. To which Donald Trump said, well, maybe they just care a little bit more about who won the election than you did, Kevin McCarthy. You guys have got to deal with reality here. By the way, the speech and debate clause stands for the exact opposite principle who our distinguished new member just spoke about a moment ago. It says that members of Congress cannot be questioned anywhere else. other than Congress. So
Point of
he should
privilege.
read the speech or debate
Mr.
clause
Chairman.
aloud.
Let him finish his sentence there. Now, Chair recognizes Mr. Burchett from
Mr.
Tennessee
Chairman.
for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My colleagues seem to want to talk about the justice system, so let's talk about it. November of last year, the chairman issued a subpoena to Hunter Biden to appear on December 13th, for a closed-door deposition. Instead of respecting the rule of law, Hunter Biden chose to give a press conference on the front steps of the Senate. To show such contempt for Congress without fear of repercussions highlights a theme throughout this administration and Democrat administrations before it. If you're a big-name Democrat, then you are immune to prosecution. Former Attorney General Eric Holder said as much in a memo he wrote regarding collateral consequences. For those that don't know, the collateral consequence policy allowed prosecutors to consider whether charging a company or individual will result in greater societal harm than not charging them. It's why the banks weren't held criminally accountable to the fallout of the 2008 financial crisis. It is why Jeffrey Epstein's clients aren't behind bars. It is also the mindset of President Biden and his family. Too big to jail. Not too big to fail, too big to jail. The two-tier justice system is a disgrace to our country and the principles it was founded on. I thank the chairman and the committee for the hard work they put in to hold the Biden administration accountable, but I doubt our Justice Department has the guts or the wherewithal to do anything about it. And I would like to yield my time to my friend from Florida, Byron Donalds.
Actually,
I'll yield.
yield
let me yield to Miss May. She hasn't gotten enough quality TV time today, so I'll give her a little more time.
Thank you, and then I'll yield to my colleague from Florida as well. I'm going to try to be quick here because I was accused by my colleague on the other side of the aisle about my white privilege. I want to say, number one, as the former ranking member of the Civil Rights Subcommittee under Chairman Raskin last session, I take great pride as a white female Republican to address the inadequacies in our country. I come from a district where rich and poor is literally black and white, black versus white on most days. My largest jail in my district, which is the largest jail in the state of South Carolina, has had 7 or 8 deaths in the last 2 years. And I was there with our black and African American council members trying to get the right thing done. And I come from a district where black men have been killed by law enforcement, tased to death in our jails, and I've stood with those black families because I know the differences that they see day to day in their life, and I try to do the best that I can. I come from a district where the first African-American, first black man in the U.S. House of Representatives was Joseph P. Rainey, represented my district back in the 1800s with that. The last black member of the U.S. House of Representatives before Reconstruction came from South Carolina, George P. Murray, the black man, former slave, and entrepreneur who founded the Republican Party in South Carolina. One of the founding members was named Robert Smalls, who commandeered a Confederate ship and gave it to Union soldiers and served his country admirably in the process. In my district, it was Harriet Tubman, and you can see it in the movie Harriet, who rescued more than 700 slaves in one night in Beaufort County, South Carolina. So I am very well aware of our rich history and try to recognize it as best as I can in the position that I have. And I resent the fact that you're going to throw that in my face up here. I'm one of the few people that you'll see on my side of the aisle trying to do the right thing for the right people every single day. And I would like to yield the remaining balance of time to my colleague from Florida.
This has been a very interesting hearing. Mr. Waltz, welcome to Oversight. Yes, it usually gets like this. Look, let's be very clear. This isn't about Hunter Biden's white privilege. It's about Hunter Biden's Democrat privilege. Because Donald Trump Jr. showed up for 5 congressional subpoenas. There was never this circus where he was subpoenaed by House Democrats and he showed up on the Senate side or showed up at the White House to answer in some fake, phony, lame press conference, not actually going to the House and doing what he was compelled by a subpoena to do. Hunter Biden did that. And then he has the unmitigated gall to show up here when we know that we're going through actually the legislation for contempt, with, by the way, Mr. Chairman, we should actually get to the legislation of contempt. The speechifying is great, but let's do our business, members. He has the gall to come here, show up, and then when the Democrats are saying, hey, he wants to speak, he leaves. This is a joke. This is a farce. The man has been subpoenaed by Congress. Oh, and by the way, the January 6th committee, Mr. Raskin, which you did sit on, by the way, That was not a normally ordered committee of Congress because Nancy Pelosi did not want the Republican members that then Leader McCarthy put up.
According to the courts, it was.
My time, sir.
Will you yield for a correction?
I was respectful of your time. I didn't say anything. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's move forward with our business. He should be held in contempt. There was a subpoena. He did not answer it. Any other American will be held in contempt by Congress. Any other. This is Democrat privilege of the highest order. Let's do our jobs. I yield.
Gentleman yields. Chair now recognizes Ms. Ocasio-Cortez from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to address briefly, quickly, that moment about privilege and all of this that we're seeing here. It was a very beautiful speech by the gentlelady, who, as she mentioned, was helped lead on the now majority side, the Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Subcommittee. But I think it's so exemplary of the point that she also oversaw the elimination of the Civil Rights Subcommittee on this committee, which really kind of gives the whole game away. We show up, we give speeches, we give flowery words, but at the end of the day, participate in the structural erosion of the rights and representation of people that are marginalized, women, people of color, people that just need to see their due process and civil liberties protected in this country. But I will move on. As also the Republican side had mentioned in their many raisings of the January 6th committee, that it's not just Hunter Biden, you, me, any individual subject to equal treatment under the law, to be held up to accountability under the law, but it is also these committees and this committee that is subject to oversight and law. We must comply with the law here as well. Now, I may be one of the very few people that actually believes in Congress, in this country, but I do, and many of us do here. And we have an obligation to engage in good faith participation to execute and comply with the subpoena. The chairman said in front of the country several times to Hunter Biden, you can show up here in front of the world, in front of the public. Hunter Biden took him up on that offer. He said, I will show up in public. I will show up in public. He showed up here today. He showed up here in the past. And Mr. Chairman, I know you do your best with what you've got, but you've got members here that have submitted falsified evidence to the record. You have members here that have submitted and mischaracterized closed-door hearings, and people want to say back and forth at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what party it's happened from. You've got members who've engaged in revenge porn in this committee. So it is understandable why Hunter Biden would want to testify in front of the public for the American people to be able to witness that testimony for themselves. You've got members who've defied subpoenas. You've got members who we are 1 year into the term asking what the rules are at the beginning of the committee. The book was given to us on day one. And so what we should do is allow the man to testify. I believe in the power of the Oversight Committee. Frankly, I believe in it regardless of whether Republicans or Democrats have the chair, because I believe that this committee should have the power of oversight, and we cannot do that on a partisan basis. And so for that, I implore this committee to allow Hunter Biden to testify publicly. I implore and I ask for that to happen. And we cannot do that by getting engaged in this back and forth on a defiance of the subpoena. Let him comply. Let him do it today. Let him do it tomorrow. But let the man do it. And with that, I yield back to the ranking member.
Thank you, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. I think you went right to the heart of the issue here. If this ended up going to court, Mr. Chairman, and I hope it doesn't, I really hope that this committee will act in a way to negotiate and achieve a compromise with the witness. But if it goes to the court, it's going to present a novel question. What happens when a committee represented by its distinguished chairman goes out in public and repeatedly invites and challenges a witness to come before the committee, and then that witness gives the answer, yes, I will come in? At that point, the committee pulls a bait and switch and says, well, we actually don't want you to come before the full committee as was offered repeatedly in public by the chairman, but instead we'd like you to come to a back room and do it there in a closed deposition. Now, undoubtedly, if that had been the original offer, the committee would stand in a very good place, the way we did with Mr. Biggs and Mr. Perry and Mr. Jordan, because they were told to come in, they were subpoenaed, and they blew off the subpoenas of the committee, which is why I don't think anybody should be voting on that side other than Ms. Mace, because Ms. Mace is the one who took the position that the rule of law means something. And I take the position if we give somebody a subpoena, they should come in. But there's a very sticky problem now. What happens when we give them one offer A and then switch it over to offer B? That's why I hope you will work it out, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for yielding.
Gentlelady's time's expired. To respond to the gentlelady, he can come in for a hearing after the deposition. Chair now recognizes Ms. McClain for 5 minutes.
So I just want to bring everything back home. This hearing is a contempt of Congress hearing for Hunter Biden. It's not about January 6th. It's not about Mr. Perry. It's not about white privilege. It's a contempt of Congress hearing about Hunter Biden. Although I appreciate the diversion tactics, like my colleague from Florida said, let's get back to our business, which is actually the contempt of Congress. I also want to thank my colleague, Ms. Cortez. I agree. Let him comply, right? Let him comply. And with our ranking member, let's follow the rule of law. So in contrast, let me read the rules of the committee real quickly. It's on page 9 of the rule book, right? And it talks about notices. Notices for the taking of depositions shall specify the date, the time, and the place of examination. Depositions may continue from day to day. Then you go to section D. Consultation with the ranking minority member of the committee shall include, listen for it, 3 calendar days notice. So although I'm sure any defendant would like to come in and say, Judge, I want to come in on this day, and the defendant is going to tell the judge and the legal system how the trial is going to run, unfortunately, that's not how it works. It's really simple. So I do agree with you. Let him comply. Let him comply with the subpoena that we gave him. He chose not to, so therefore we are holding Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress. And I would also like to say, you had the opportunity when you all were in charge, or y'all were in charge, to do the same with the members on our side of the aisle. You didn't do that. That's not our fault. That's yours. So we're here to talk about Hunter Biden. For everyone watching today, and for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I want to be clear again what this hearing is really about. Hunter Biden was subpoenaed to answer Congress, right? That's it. Questions. But he violated federal law by failing to appear before the committee. You can't spin that, for my colleague on the other side of the aisle. You can't spin that. The bottom line is, Hunter did not show up, and he committed a crime. You see, we are a land of laws, and we must follow those laws. And that's what we're here to do today. Instead, he was on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol where he made a public statement without taking questions from the media, conveniently. So instead of showing up for his legal obligation, he showed up just steps away from a hearing room to spit in the face of this Congress. And unfortunately, that is Hunter Biden's MO. We're merely doing our job. What we're doing here today is showing the country that Hunter will not receive special treatment due to his last name. It's very, very simple. And he will be held to the same standard that every other American citizen would be expected to do. Can you imagine if you're average America and you get a subpoena and you go in and tell the judge, hey, let me tell you, here's how it's going to work, Judge. I'm not showing up. I'm not showing up. I'm going to do it my way. I know we have laws, but don't worry about those laws because that would never fly. But that's exactly what Hunter Biden's doing. And if we care about this institution, if we care about democracy, at some point in time, we have to hold the law and people who break the law accountable. Or, like my colleague said, we are going to have anarchy. So simply put, it's not about anything else. We're talking about Hunter Biden and his non-compliance. And you can get up and scream and holler and rant and rave and talk about everything but the fact we subpoenaed Congress legally Hunter Biden, and he chose not to show up. Read the rules. He has to follow the law. I know that's a very foreign concept, but you have to do it. And for the Biden family, you too have to follow the laws. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back.
A quick parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The gentlelady makes an excellent point about the 3-day notice requirement for subpoenas. I don't think that's ever been complied with in this committee. Will you commit to?
That's not my issue. I'm just reading the laws.
No, it's my time, Mrs. McClain. Thank you so much. Would you commit to honor the 3-day notice requirement that Mrs. McClain properly invoked?
Would I comply?
I'll say this to answer the ranking member's question, then I'll recognize Ms. Stansbury. We have complied with the 3 days.
Okay, well, we might have a dispute about it, but
What
you
I
will
would ask
continue
is,
that
will you
going
comply?
forward. You will
Will
continue
you
going
comply?
forward.
We have followed
That's
the
my
rules.
question. Will
We
you
don't
comply?
have the chair, Mrs. McClain, and you don't have the time.
We have followed the rules. This is
it's simple.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Stansbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's always a wild and interesting adventure here in the Oversight Committee, and this morning certainly doesn't disappoint. I want to talk for a few moments about the resolution that's been proposed in the ANS here, because that's what we're here to debate this morning, and really the content of that, including the assertions about the investigation that led to the moment that we're at here today. But I am really glad that my colleague mentioned that we are a land of laws and that every citizen should have to comply with them, including members of this committee, not to mention a chairman, who was subpoenaed during the last Congress and refused to respond. So if we're going to apply these laws, then they must apply equally, I would think, to even members of this committee, and certainly to the frontrunner in the GOP's presidential election, which I'll get to in a moment. But let's talk a little bit about this ANS and about the background and correct the record a little bit. First of all, I want to talk about the evidence that was presented to this committee as part of this investigation. More than 62,000 pages of records from the National Archives, on top of 20,000 pages that were already made publicly available, 30,000 pages of private bank records, 2,000 pages of activity reports provided by the Treasury Department, dozens of hours of testimony from special counsel, U.S. attorneys, DOJ officials, FBI, IRS agents, financial advisors, friends, business partners, evidence provided by the Ways and Means Committee, and expert witness testimony by the GOP's own witnesses right here in this committee in September, who sat right there at that table and said there was not sufficient evidence to support proceeding with an impeachment. In fact, there are numerous members of the GOP currently serving in Congress who do not believe there is sufficient evidence. So my question is, where are the receipts? You have reviewed thousands of pages of documents, countless hours of testimony, talked to expert witnesses, including your own witnesses, that can't provide a single iota of evidence of wrongdoing by this president. But last week, House Democrats released this. We have the receipts. In fact, they're all right here in the Mazars report. And for any of you that have not dug in on this report, I want to talk a little bit about what this report shows, because it's actual receipts from foreign governments who spent $7.8 million at Trump properties during his presidency while they were actively seeking to influence foreign policy and decisions by the administration.
Will the gentlelady yield to the
So
question?
let's talk about some of the receipts that are in here. Malaysia, over $250,000 was spent by representatives of Malaysia while their ex-president was being investigated for a massive corruption scheme and which Trump's ex-fundraiser was indicted for illegally lobbying on. Saudi Arabia, tens of thousands of dollars spent by the Saudi government and by the Crown Prince and his staff.
Do you yield to a question?
Later give $2 billion to Jared Kushner's private firm. Qatar, tens of thousands of dollars spent by Qatar during what was described as a charm offensive and an arms sale to the government of Qatar by the Trump administration. Kazakhstan, thousands of dollars spent by the president of Kazakhstan on a controversial visit which raised questions about human rights violations, business dealings, and a money laundering scheme involving Donald Trump's properties in New York. So my question is, if the GOP actually cares about criminal activity, how about they investigate the receipts that we have right here?
Can I answer that question?
Of influence peddling by Donald Trump and a man who is currently facing trial in 4 jurisdictions on 91 counts of criminal activity, who's been twice impeached by this body and is currently trying to run for president again. And
I would love to answer your question.
Of this committee has already endorsed. This is not factually based. This is a farce. This is a political stunt, and it is designed to help Donald Trump secure the nomination this November.
Will you yield to a question?
So let's call it what it is. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield my time back to the chair.
4 seconds. 4 seconds. 3, 2. All right. Time's expired.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter information for the record.
What's the information?
Oh, my God.
State the information.
Thank you.
I reserve the right to object. The minority has not provided a copy of the material for the record. In the past, she's displayed pornography. Is pornography allowed to be, or pornographic photos allowed to be displayed in this committee room, Mr. Chairman?
It's not pornography.
Okay, well, you're the expert.
I'm not an expert, Mr. Raskin.
Seems like it.
Mr. Chairman, I object to the unanimous
Mr. Chairman,
request.
Hold on.
All you need is one objection.
We need decorum. I'm gonna let the lady state, and then if you object still, we'll go from there.
Mr. Chairman, don't we have an opportunity to review the material before
I reclaim my
provided?
time. I reclaim my time. Mr. Chair, I reclaim my time. I'd like to enter for the record an excerpt from a bank statement.
Hold on, there's a
bank
objection,
statement that's
Mr. Chairman.
public in regards to Hunter Biden
Mr. Mifune
and
has
his
already
bank
objected.
accounts, in his payments.
Mr. Chairman, I object to the styrofoam board. It's not a document.
Reclaiming order. We'll.
Clearly, Democrats today don't want the truth to come out.
Mr. Chairman,
But
this just means that
I would
any
like to
member will
enter
be able
for
to
the
add
record-
to their 5 minutes by putting on a display of
Mr.
placards.
Chairman, I'd like to enter for the record
I think
a
all
statement
members-
from a bank report that shows
Can we get some order
of
here?
Hunter
Mr.
Biden's
Chairman,
bank
where
accounts
are we in
and
the
human
All right.
rights.
Okay. Let's hold off on this. There's several objections. We're going to talk staffs between each other, and then we'll go from there. But I understand. I think what you're saying is from the laptop.
Someone on this committee accused me of revenge porn, and I have a right to respond to that, and I'd like to introduce
We're within the rules of the
evidence
committee, everyone.
for the
Mr. Chairman,
record. This is important evidence for the record, and it pertains to our investigation into Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. And this comes
So
from
do it behind closed doors like you do it.
It doesn't appear to be bad, but you ought to.
But Mr. Chairman, she's got 9 placards there. Does she get an additional 5 minutes or 10 minutes?
I don't understand how any of you who support the
Well, what's
genital
the order?
mutilation of
Okay.
children
We're
and
gonna
drag queens
we're
showing
gonna
their
we're
body
gonna
parts
reclaim
at parades
order here.
are
We'll
offended.
suspend and let the staff discuss the evidence from the laptop being entered into the record. Chair now recognizes Mr. Fallon from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so
okay. Hold on. We suspend, so we need to stop for a moment. Okay, hold on. We'll get this. Y'all gonna discuss? You want to go?
You see, you just submit it and you put it in. You don't get a speech.
Right.
You don't get a speech to UC. No. You get the request, you say what it is, and you put it in.
So we're going to move on. We're going to call on Fallon now. Okay. All right. Reconvene. Chair now recognizes Mr. Fallon from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, you have to acknowledge that there's a concentrated effort to deflect and distract, and this is not about January 6th, and unfortunately for the Democrats, it's not about Donald Trump. This is about Biden family corruption, plain and simple. And what really gets me is from just an individual and from an American to being an American is the fact that I disagree vehemently with most of our friends across the aisle when it comes to politics. I will submit that most folks that serve in Congress, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, are not corrupt. They're not on the make. They're not trying to enrich themselves. Hunter Biden is. The Biden family was. And so to sit here and defend a fella that doesn't merit that kind of defense is just interesting, and quite frankly, I find it sad as well. And I think he's a coward to come in here with this stunt, again, because, you know, you can define someone that's all about themselves by the way in which they act, and he clearly does that. That's what we're here to discuss. So let's talk about the process, because we've been told that, hey, he was here, he's ready to testify, just let him testify. For the American people, to make it very clear and digestible, when you are deposed in Congress, the majority gets an hour and the minority gets an hour, and it can go on indefinitely. So what usually happens is you can get 100 hours of questions in. You can go drill down. You can get into the efficacy of the procedure because you can go in depth, and you can hold whoever is the witness to account. If we have just public testimony, what happens here is we all get 5 minutes. Times roughly about 60 equals 300. Doing the math without a calculator, that's 5 hours. So instead of hundreds of hours, you only get 5. And witnesses are very good with their counsel to deflect and distract and answer really slowly, etc. That's why this is about procedure. 100 hours, 200 hours, and then we can come in to public testimony and ask questions about what we have read and make that public. So what I would have loved to, he was here, he left, unfortunately, because I would have loved to at least ask questions while he's in the room for the first time. I've never laid naked eyes on the man until just now. But I would have loved to have asked certain questions like, why did he feel special that he could evade paying taxes on millions of dollars of income? Why doesn't he pay it back? I know a lot of it is already outside of the statute of limitations, so he can't be prosecuted for it, but he can certainly still pay it back. That's a moral obligation that any American has. I'd like to ask him what he did, his company did, to earn $3.5 million from Yelena Baturina, who was married to a corrupt oligarch who used to be the mayor of Moscow. What did he do to have Kenish Razhikev from Kazakhstan wire him $142,300? The very next day he bought a Porsche. What did he do for Mr. Razhikev? What did he do? Did he get bribed, naked bribe, of $5 million by Mykola Zlochevsky? And did he have any experience in the energy sector prior to his father becoming vice president, because Zlochevsky paid him $1 million a year? Interestingly enough, the CFO of Burisma, Vedant Pizarski, had dinner after he paid Hunter Biden millions of dollars, had dinner with his then sitting vice president dad at Cafe Milano. Did that happen? Because it seems like it did. Did Kenish Razhikev, who gave him, but essentially bought him the Porsche, he also had dinner with his dad. And yes, coincidentally, Yelena Baturina as well had dinner with his sitting vice president father at the time. Who I would also like to have asked him, having been an entrepreneur business person myself, why create 30 shell companies if you have a legitimate business? What did your business do? What services did they provide? What goods did they sell? Who pockets seed money? I have never met anybody in business that pocketed seed money. It's the lifeblood of your venture. Why did you take millions from foreign entities? And who was the big guy? Mr. Hunter Biden, was it your dad? 10% for the big guy? When you said in that WhatsApp message that I'm sitting right here with my father, was your father really there? Will you give up your geolocations on your phone with your dad so we can determine if you guys were actually in the same room at that time? Why did you email your daughter or text her and tell her about, boy, I wish I didn't have to give 50% of my salary to dad? This all is just questions that under a deposition, when we have hundreds of hours, we could ask this. And I'm only one member of a committee of 60. I'm sure my colleagues would have plenty of questions as well. So this is what it's about. It's about justice. And think about who you're defending here. He's not worthy of your defense. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The chair recognizes Mr. Lynch for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will agree with my friend and colleague, the gentleman from Texas, that this is a sad day, but perhaps sad for different reasons. This whole process has become such a sham. The underlying purpose at the beginning of these hearings was that, as was the title of one of the first hearings we had, a hearing on the basis for an impeachment inquiry against President Joseph R. Biden. And at that hearing, the Republicans and the Democrats had an opportunity to bring witnesses forward that would actually provide evidence to the committee so that we could make a decision to substantiate or to undermine the call for an impeachment. And we sat in this hearing, and the Republicans brought their witnesses in, and I had to admit, witnesses that had considerable experience and expertise and impressive resumes. And so we asked them, so this is the big moment. We asked these expert witnesses that the Republicans had brought in, are there any basis or underpinnings that would warrant an impeachment inquiry at this point? And these witnesses had reviewed almost all of the 14,000 documents that have been provided, transaction reports, Treasury reports, and I'll give you the answers. These are the Republican witnesses. This is Jonathan Turley and I think Bruce Dubinsky was a consultant. One witness said, and I quote him, he did not believe that any of the current evidence would support articles of an impeachment, close quote. That's the Republican witness that you had your moment. You had your moment to bring in the witnesses.
Would the gentleman yield?
No, I will not yield. I will not yield. The other witness that the Republicans brought forward against President Biden, he said under questioning he had no basis to even suggest that there was corruption, fraud, or any wrongdoing on the part of the president. Now, we are all familiar with Hunter Biden's, his conduct. There have been explanations of his drug addiction that have been widely publicized, something that maybe a few families of members of this committee might be familiar with, when people go sideways because they're addicted to drugs. But the very moment to pursue the underlying purpose of these hearings has been completely diverted. There's been no evidence brought forward against the President of the United States. And as to this witness coming here today, or his reluctance to submit himself to private investigations, can be, I think, credibly explained given the lack of trust that has surrounded these hearings. There have been story after story about leaks coming from those private interviews. Blatant misinformation and disinformation that the chairman and other members of the committee have offered to the press. So-called bombshells. That's what it was on Fox TV. Bombshells turned out to be a dud. Turned out to be completely false. But under the auspices of this committee, those members, including the chairman, put out these stories in the press because they could not be refuted. They were not subject to cross-examination. They were not provided for or provided by any credible witness. That was just made up in the minds of the chairman of those members. That's why this gentleman wanted to testify in public, so someone could not distort his statements and leak them wrongfully to the press. The chairman.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Luna for 5 minutes.
This contempt proceeding is about upholding the rule of law. You know, with recently what happened with Jeffrey Epstein and the client list, we can see that many rich and powerful people, to include people in Washington, were held above the law, and that is simply not fair. Interestingly enough, though, one of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, Virginia Giuffre, actually vindicated Trump. What you'll notice is that the media did not want to cover that, but why is that? It's because it will show a double standard that exists within our justice system, and also the media bias against those, especially Republicans and conservatives, that are simply not guilty of what they are accusing us of. So I just want to put this in perspective. The reason we are doing this today is because Hunter Biden failed to comply with our subpoena. Hunter Biden, I don't care about his drug addiction. Yes, you are. Many of us have experienced some of these awful things impacting our family, but that doesn't mean that Hunter Biden gets a pass or that we should feel any sympathy for him breaking the law. I want to just point to behind me, U.S. Code 192, a refusal of a witness to testify or produce papers. It means that you should be, one, subject to a misdemeanor, a fine up to $1,000, and anywhere from 1 to 12 months in prison. For your average American that doesn't have the connections that Hunter Biden has, this is what you face. So I want to just point out that when my colleague, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, says we must comply with the law, I agree with you. When Ranking Member Raskin pointed out that that Donald Trump's allies should be held and we should not tolerate these contemptuous violations of the rule of law, I agree with that. But then let's use these exact same standards against their own. Frankly, I think that as of right now, there is a double standard that exists. We have to hold him accountable. He broke the law. He will be held accountable, and that's exactly why I'm supporting this contempt proceeding. Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Tlaib for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to yield to our ranking member, but before I do, I just, after coming back and being in our districts for so long, no one is asking me about this. They can't pay their bills. There is a lot of cost of living struggle all over our districts, and I just wish we would use this committee to talk about those issues. I mean, even on having the Sadler folks in here and talking about that, the cost of insulin. I mean, Mr. Chair, I would love to work with you in a bipartisan way to talk about those issues that I think really there's responsibility all over the place in regards to the fact that so many of our American residents and communities across the country are struggling. With that, I yield to our ranking member, Raskin.
Thank you, Ms. Tlaib, for your tremendous and enduring devotion to your constituents and the public good of all Americans. Why are we here, colleagues? Well, between January of 2017 and January of 2021, we suffered the most lawless presidency of our lifetime. It began by Donald Trump saying that he would keep his more than 500 businesses going. That's right, and he wouldn't divest himself of any of those businesses, and he would not adopt a rule in honor of the Emoluments Clause, consistent with the Emoluments Clause, declining to take money from Saudi Arabia, China, United Arab Emirates, and so on. And then he proceeded, as we've learned, to collect at least $7.8 million from foreign governments, and that's actually a tiny fraction of what he got, because that was only for the first 2 years before the chairman, in his wisdom, decided to tell Mazars to stop complying with a judicial court order. And so that was all we got, was 2 years for 4 businesses out of more than 500. And that was just for 20 countries out of 195 countries on earth. But the lawlessness lasted up until yesterday, when Donald Trump's lawyer got up before the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals and asserted that President Trump, or any other president for that matter, has a right to order assassinations of his political opponents and not be prosecuted for it unless he's impeached and convicted first, which is completely at odds with the text of the Constitution, the history of the Constitution. But he asserted a right to assassinate other citizens unless first he's impeached or convicted, which means all you got to do is kill your political opponents and then kill enough of your political opponents in the House and Senate to keep yourself from being impeached or convicted. My friends, please don't look at your phones and papers right now. This goes to the heart of the republic. Take a position on it. Even if you're going to support it, take a position on it. Don't stick your heads in the sand. Donald Trump is doing this to our country. He's asserting the right of the president to murder people and not be prosecuted for it. Well, so why are we here? Well, Donald Trump insisted to numerous Republicans and in public and on Twitter and on Truth Social that Joe Biden be impeached. Why? Well, because Donald Trump was impeached twice, the last time for inciting a violent insurrection against his own vice president, against the Congress of the United States to overthrow an election. And if you don't believe that, you've got to tell me that if Mike Pence had buckled under to weeks and months of pressure, that Donald Trump would have said, oh no, I was just kidding. I'm not actually going to seize the presidency. Come on, if you believe that, you're too innocent to be let out of the house by yourself. So anyway, Donald Trump says, I don't want to be the only one running for president who's been impeached. Impeach Joe Biden. Figure out something. We were here for a year. You guys did not lay a glove on Joe Biden. You don't have a single credible piece of evidence, not one iota, showing any crime by Joe Biden. As Mr. Lynch says, even your own witnesses came up and said they didn't see it at the one hearing that you had on impeachment. So why are we here? Well, we can't go after Joe Biden. He's clean. Let's go after Hunter Biden. Let's go get him. And that's why I'm so suspicious of where we are today, Mr. Chairman, because I heard you numerous times say, come before the committee, come and testify before the world, come and tell everybody what happened. And he took you up on it, and he said yes. And I said, finally, we'll get to hear from Hunter Biden. We'll get to hear answers to all those questions Mr. Fallon posed. But then you wouldn't take yes for an answer. You said, no, we want to go to a back room and do it there, and then we will leak out appropriate details, which, of course, we have seen has allowed for radical distortions of people's testimony before this committee. You have not released the vast majority of transcribed interviews that have been in the back room so we can leak out specific details. So that's not right. That's why we have questions about it. But I'm with Ms. Mace. Let's bring them all in. Let's bring in all the Republicans who still haven't testified about what they know about what happened on January 6th, and let's bring Hunter Biden in. Let's do that all together. I'd be for that. And thank you for yielding, Mr. Tlaib, and I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Langworthy for 5 minutes.
Well, we've certainly had enough distractions here today, and in the political stunt that we saw here at the beginning of this hearing, Hunter Biden strutting in here like a real tough guy while he refused to sit for a deposition that he'd been lawfully subpoenaed to do. It must be embarrassing to have to defend all of this, and we certainly have Trump derangement syndrome on display in a big way in this chamber today. Over the last year, the Oversight Committee has uncovered a plethora of evidence that is directly pointing at the corruption from Joe Biden and his family. This level of corruption is what you'd expect to see in a third world country, not the United States of America. If the volume of evidence was uncovered on any other influential family in the United States, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would no doubt initiate thorough investigations. Now, just imagine if Hunter was a Republican. The president's son does not deserve special treatment, period. Holding Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress is the responsible reaction to his blatant disregard for federal law and our duty to investigate potential wrongdoings by the President of the United States. This committee has analyzed thousands of pages of bank records, leading to the discovery of $24 million of wire transfers and payments from foreign companies and foreign nationals directly to this Biden family. Through interviews with Biden family closest associates, the committee discovered that Hunter Biden used his father's name and influence in meetings with foreign nationals over 20 times. Witness testimonies proved that Hunter Biden dined with foreign individuals from countries such as Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan alongside his father, who is the sitting vice president of the United States. And the list of evidence goes on and on. The president himself has been exposed for lying. Both the White House and Hunter have used every tool at their disposal to obstruct this investigation and to block the gathering of evidence. This blatant corruption must be held to account. It's one of the major duties of this very committee. And that's why on September 12, 2023, as a result of the significant evidence against the current president, the Speaker of the House asked the Oversight Committee to conduct an inquiry to determine whether or not sufficient grounds existed for the impeachment of President Biden. Hunter Biden's testimony is a critical component of the impeachment inquiry into whether President Biden or his family personally profited from his office as vice president or his current role as president of the United States. And these facts cannot get in the way. We have got to get on with this investigation and end the distractions that we've heard here today. let's get this contempt provision put forward, and let's move forward with this impeachment inquiry.
Will the gentleman yield? Will the gentleman yield?
Mr. Gosar.
Will yield my time to Mr. Gosar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Langworthy. You know, to the ranking member, you know, we're cherry picking, and to Mr. Lynch, we're cherry picking because if you go back to those individuals we had as witnesses, they all said there doesn't exist that information now, but there exists the potential to be there. And the inquiry is different than an impeachment. It is a search for that document. So I think we got to be very, very careful when we're on both sides when we're talking about this, that we give the whole picture, not part of the picture, the whole picture to this.
And what's been found since then?
Well, once again, there's stuff there. So
I'm sorry?
There is stuff there.
There's stuff there?
Yeah.
Can you share it with us?
Because you stack up these random corporations. What are you producing? If I'm a manufacturer, I would do that because I have different businesses accomplishing that. They have nothing to sell. Some paintings, it was access to the president. So now whether that reaches high crimes and misdemeanors, I don't know. I'm not an attorney. But last but not least, I want to make sure that we also get to this, is that you did the process and you stated it. The language has been repeated over and over again. You do this massive hunt with attorneys, not people like dentists or others. You do it with attorneys to gather that information. And then they selectively compile it. You guys get questions, we get questions, and we cover the ground more efficiently. That's why this process works. I agree with you. You do the behind the doors, then you come out here for the public. And I think there's no difference there. I yield back.
Good. Chair now recognizes Mr. Kassar for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My distinguished colleague, the gentlelady from Florida, held up a poster board saying we should hold Hunter Biden in contempt because of a provision saying refusal of a witness to testify. But that doesn't apply in that we have a witness that was here and is willing to testify. Now, I'll give everybody credit here. There seems to be disagreement about whether to do the closed-door deposition, but there is an area of agreement. And the area of agreement is to have a public hearing. And so what I'm interested in, I'll yield a minute of time over to you, Chairman, or somebody from the other side. We've been here for hours, and I have still yet to figure out why we don't have Mr. Hunter Biden here to answer our questions for whatever period of time we want in front of the Oversight Committee. So I want to understand. I want to give Mr. Fallon due credit from the great state of Texas for saying, well, he wants to make sure we have enough time. Mr. Chairman, I'm sure we could agree to whatever amount of time was necessary, but I'm having a lot of trouble understanding why the Republican majority won't take yes for an answer and ask questions of Hunter Biden here publicly. That I think we would really learn, because all I've been hearing on TV news is over and over again that we need to ask Hunter Biden questions. He's saying we can. Why refuse to have this public hearing that it sounds like?
Are you yielding me?
Yeah, I'm happy to yield you 30 seconds.
So we've obtained thousands of pages of bank documents. We've reviewed 170 suspicious activity reports from banks filed against the Bidens. From my banking background, that's unprecedented to have that many bank violations that allege very serious things, from money laundering to tax evasion to bribery. And we have a lot of questions. We want to treat him like any other witness. He doesn't get to set the rules. We will depose him. And look, we split time with Democrats. You all get an equal amount of time with Hunter Biden. Then we'll have a public hearing.
But I guess my question is, if there is disagreement, and it sounds like there is, around the deposition, why not have the public hearing? Is there a reason?
We will after the deposition.
I understand, Mr. Chairman, but nobody has explained to me clearly yet, and I think to your own districts, to my district, why not call Hunter Biden in tomorrow? Why not ask him in next week? We're ready.
Well, gentlemen, yield. I'd love to answer that question.
Yeah, so I would have loved to depose him right here today.
We had a motion.
Rules. You have 3 days.
Let's do it in 3 days.
No, but my whole point is behind closed doors. I would have gone right now. He's here. He's got his legal representation there. Let's play this game. But we have rules that say you have 3 days.
I'm not playing game one. I'm sure we could waive the 3 days. Second, we could have it here in 3 days if there's agreement about if what we're hearing from the Republican side over and over and over again is they've got questions for Hunter Biden. The quotes from this hearing. Hunter Biden's testimony is critical. I want to delve into questions I have for Mr. Biden. Why not ask for those? Why not ask for that tomorrow?
The deposition tomorrow?
No, we would have him here in public tomorrow in front of everyone. I understand you're saying after the deposition, but my question for you is just very clearly, why not have the public hearing tomorrow?
Will the gentleman yield to that question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if
and
you
Mr.
may.
Donalds, I want to compliment you because I remember our first Oversight Committee hearing, you said it would be good to have these real conversations, so I genuinely
I am all for this, Mr. Kassar. I actually enjoy this part if we ever get to it. Look, the reality is, and you have attorneys on your side of the aisle, there is never any proceeding that takes place without a deposition of the witness. The reason why is because if something comes up in the round of questioning, either A, members of this committee may not be prepared because they don't have all the information from the witness, because the witness was never given an opportunity with his attorneys present to actually give out that level of information. So you need the deposition process before you bring a witness into open hearing. This happens all the time. This is actually the protocol of the House. And Mr. Kassar, what your side of the aisle is requesting, with all due respect, is a deviation from the historical precedent of the House of Representatives.
I'll yield back to the ranking member.
Well, but thank you for moving the ball forward with that explanation. That has been the practice sometimes, not all times. The vast majority of witnesses who come before this committee come without being deposed first. We come and ask for their testimony. But in any event, even for a witness who's being subpoenaed, like Mr. Biden was, we have a completely different situation when the chairman goes out publicly and says, we will give you the choice, A or B. You can have a deposition or you can come in the hearing, but I challenge you, I invite you, I insist that you come before the committee, and repeatedly says that. So that's why I think legally it's a very complex question, but I don't see why we take this all the way to all the way to court. If you guys really want to hear from him, let's have a public hearing and then depose him afterwards. But he's saying he doesn't want to be misrepresented. Thank you for yielding.
Time's expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Burleson from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What should be obvious to the American people, what I think we need to just say to the American people is to point out that this kind of food fight, this circus that we've experienced is the reason why we want to have a deposition. In a deposition, you don't get people distracting the American public with all these other topics. And during a deposition, they don't get to lie to the American people for 5 minutes at a time. They don't get to distract, they don't get to lie, and they don't get to divert from the facts of what's happening. But what I see happening is what's being telegraphed here is that they're building a case, a political case, really, because that's what this is. It's all politics that they're entering into for why the Department of Justice, or giving Merrick Garland an excuse, which we all knew that he would not prosecute, probably not prosecute these contempt charges, because it would be hypocritical if he did so. Because he prosecuted Steve Bannon, even though Bannon was actually working for the president, and was able to raise the speech and debate clause that was mentioned in the Constitution. Merrick Garland still prosecuted him for that. Here's what's really frustrating to the American people, and they see right through this. We're now going through a second process over really the same crimes that were committed when Joe Biden was vice president. And those crimes include the creation of dozens and dozens of limited liability companies, dozens of bank accounts. When people say, where are the facts? Well, I want to ask, what facts are you looking for? Because to me, bank records are facts. Suspicious activity reports are facts. Copies of checks are facts. When you juxtapose that with the WhatsApp message and what's on the Hunter Biden laptop and the deposition from witnesses like Mr. Archer, when you add to it further depositions, as we're going to hear about soon, the art dealer, when you layer all that together, that's a compelling story. There's a lot of facts. And you know what? I would hate to be on the other side of the aisle and try to defend this situation. And so I think that the only outcome would be to distract, to try to make this a political process. But it still stands as a fact that when the Democrats were in charge, they brought in the president's son. They brought him in multiple times, and they brought him into depositions, and he agreed. And this should be should be the takeaway message to the American people. When the Trump family was asked, when they came in and they gave depositions, the Biden family, once again, Hunter Biden feels that he's privileged. He's privileged. He doesn't have to pay taxes like everyone else. He's privileged that apparently he can traffic sex workers across the globe and get away with it. He's privileged in that he can get away with acting as a foreign advocate and be able to get away with it when other people are prosecuted and sent to jail for the very same thing. The American people see that there's two standards of justice. And when we're trying to go about the people's business in a serious manner, we end up allowing a food fight, which is exactly why he did what he did when he went across the street as far away as he could from this building and had his press conference, and then why he today showed up when the hour was way too late. I yield the remainder of my time.
Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown. Chair recognizes Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am not a lawyer, and nor do I try to pretend to play one on TV. But it is plain for all of us to see we are here on behalf of one man, the self-proclaimed dictator on day one, the twice impeached, 4 times indicted, insurrection initiator and supporter, election denier, convicted fraudster, and maniacal manipulator from Mar-a-Lago, the one who lost and lost badly. We are here because my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have no positive agenda to run on. They have not accomplished one thing in their year in the majority to improve the lives of the people around this country. We are not here to hold the president in contempt of Congress. We are not even here to hold a member of President Biden's administration in contempt of Congress. For some reason, the majority has gathered us here to hold the president's son, his son, who I will remind all of us is not and has not ever been a government official, in contempt of Congress, despite his willingness to come testify publicly before this committee. So getting to the truth was never their actual goal. Instead of working together to solve big problems on behalf of the American people, my Republican colleagues continue to pursue a meritless, groundless, baseless investigation into the president's family. Meanwhile, back in my district, during our recess, I was literally dodging bullets at a funeral of a gun violence victim. And I never felt so powerless and vulnerable because I know that when I got back here, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle refused to do anything about it. Yet, they continue to make efforts to ban books, rewrite history, make it harder for people that look like me to vote, and to make it harder for women to make their own health care decisions. We see nothing on the other side of the aisle but distraction, diversion, deflection, delusion, divisiveness, and dangerous destruction of our ever so delicate democracy. So with that, I am tired of the political theater. I want to get to work for the people back home in the 11th Congressional District because they, quite frankly, don't care about Hunter Biden.
Will the gentleman
And with
yield?
that, I will yield the balance of my time to my ranking member.
Ms. Brown, thank you so much. You started off by saying something pretty profound, which is we are here instead of doing the business of the American people because the Republicans have offered us no positive agenda in their year in office. We know we've wasted countless weeks in them just trying to pick a speaker, and we've wasted countless weeks with their inertia and their do-nothing policies. But Ms. Brown, I don't know if you recall, I just don't want people having to take your word for it. I think numerous Republicans have gotten up on the floor of the House complaining about the fact that they have no agenda. I think our colleague Chip Roy from Texas said that the Republicans have not given him one thing, a single thing, I remember him saying, to campaign on. So I just want to ask you, when you're saying that they have no agenda, that's not a partisan point. You're getting that from Republicans, aren't you?
That is correct.
One of our colleagues said that there was Trump derangement syndrome, and of course, Trump derangement begins with Donald Trump himself. He thinks he has a legal right to assassinate U.S. citizens. He thinks he can grab women by their genitals, although that's not the word that he used. He said that if Joe Biden is reelected president, there will be World War II. He is obviously deranged and disoriented. But the real Trump derangement syndrome that I see is those people who cannot break from Donald Trump after he's proven himself to be completely and totally unworthy of your support. Because I'm looking at talented, gifted people on the other side of the aisle, the ones who have not left Congress in frustration or because they've broken with Donald Trump and clashed with him. But I'm still looking at people who have their wits about them, I think, but you're acting like cult members, like you're sleeping on the basement of a cult, listening to tapes all night, and I beg you to get over your Trump derangement syndrome. Thank you very much for yielding, Ms. Brown.
Chair recognizes Mr. Donalds from Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. First, it was said in this hearing, Mr. Chairman, about you specifically, that you repeatedly said you would give Mr. Biden any opportunity. He could choose which one to come and speak in front of this committee. He could do it by deposition. He could do it by open hearing. It was up to him. The truth of the matter, though, is, members, is that the chairman's words are not binding. Like no other member's words of Congress are really not binding. The binding article.
Point of order. Does the chairman agree with that? Point of order. Does the chairman agree?
Are you going to restore my time?
Point of order. Just point of order.
Okay.
Does the chairman agree that the chairman's words are not binding on the committee?
That's not a point of order. It has nothing to do with the order of this hearing. Thank you. Can I go back to 4 minutes and 34 seconds? That's where I was before I was interrupted by Mr. Raskin.
Yes. Reset the clock.
Thank you. What is binding is the actual written document, the written language in the subpoena, because a subpoena from this committee is also signed off on by the clerk of the House. That is the binding document that matters here. That is what governs. That's number one. Number two, that was said in this hearing. It was said that our witnesses said that there was no basis for an impeachment. But remember, members on the Democrat side of the aisle, what was said by Mr. Turley at the time was that there was plenty of evidence for the continuation of an impeachment inquiry. And the purpose of that hearing was the relevance basis for an impeachment inquiry. The House has now voted for an impeachment inquiry. And one of the first things that the House did after the vote of an impeachment inquiry was to subpoena Hunter Biden to appear. Hunter Biden has evaded that subpoena. So flagrantly did he evade it that he decided to show up at the Senate side to give a press conference, and Eric Swalwell, a member of the House, helped him get that time on the Senate side to give a press conference. That's a flagrant violation of a congressional subpoena. Secondarily, he has the gall to show up here when we're actually discussing contempt. And he didn't stay. He was sitting right over there. He's not here now. He said he wants to talk. He could have stayed through the whole proceeding. He chose to leave. That's his business. But he was subpoenaed to come here. Back in December, he chose not to of his own volition. He's in violation of that subpoena, a subpoena that was executed with the signature of the clerk of the House of Representatives. That is the document that is binding. That's what we work off of. Mr. Chairman, I actually want to submit for the record an article from The Hill written by Jonathan Turley, and it is titled Eric Swalwell and the Politics of Contempt.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. I'm glad something got admitted to the record. Last, a couple other points. One quick point I want to make, and this is in reference to the minorities' report about this $7.8 million. I want the minority to understand one very important distinction between Presidents Biden and President Trump. President Trump has an international real estate portfolio that he has amassed over decades. I'm quite sure if you go back through all of the hotel receipts before he was president of the United States, that you had foreign dignitaries staying at Trump hotels all across the world.
Will the gentleman yield?
I'm not going to yield, Mr. Raskin. I'm making a point. Because they're actually very nice hotels. They look good. People like staying there. President Trump was not running the Trump Organization when he was president of the United States. To my recollection, Eric Trump, the president's son, was actually running the Trump Organization when President Trump was president of the United States. So if he had a portfolio of hotels and people choose, through Expedia, through Kayak, through Hotels.com, if they choose to go and stay there, how is that the president being in violation of what the emoluments clause? That's what you're citing? Stop. Ladies and gentlemen, America, this is ridiculous. The Biden family has no business. They've never had a business except for politics. And the one thing that the Oversight Committee, in conjunction with the Ways and Means Committee and in conjunction with the Judiciary Committee, has always been able to demonstrate is that they shook down foreign nations for millions, 26 million at the latest count, and growing, millions. And there was never any business entity involved except public corruption and a pay-for-play scheme. The House Oversight Committee would like to get to the bottom of this under the impeachment inquiry of the House. We have questions for Hunter Biden. We issued a subpoena for him to answer said questions. He ignored a congressional subpoena as a private citizen. There are many attorneys on the other side of the aisle. If you had one of your clients in your private practice ignore a congressional subpoena as a private citizen, you would advise them not to, because they would be held in contempt, and they would actually be punished by the Department of Justice. So I find it interesting to see today.
Yield so I can
I'm not
respond?
going to yield, Mr. Goldman, because I had a question for you earlier. You didn't want to take my question, so I'm not going to take yours. Thank you. So, in closing, I will say, private citizens, yes, they have a responsibility to answer congressional subpoenas. They do. Hunter Biden had it, and he was flagrant. He decided to give a press conference. So we're going to do this business, and he should be held in contempt by the full House of Representatives. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Chair now recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C. for 5 minutes.
I yield my 5 minutes to Mr. Raskin.
I'd like to thank the distinguished delegate from the District of Columbia, and I need to correct the record because of several false statements made about the Foreign Emoluments Clause, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8, although I do appreciate the gentleman from Florida's attempt to at least engage on the matter of substance that was raised so powerfully by Ms. Crockett. Now, let's start with this. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8 says that neither the President nor any member of Congress can receive a present, an emolument, which means a payment, an office or a title from a prince, a king, a foreign government, quote, Mr. Donald, of any kind whatever. Of any kind whatever, without going to Congress first and obtaining the consent of Congress. There's no hotel exception, Mr. Donald, to the Foreign Emoluments Clause. There's no international real estate syndicate exception to the Foreign Emoluments Clause, Mr. Donald. And also, I will take you up on your challenge to see whether the Trump Hotel in Washington, the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, the Trump Hotel on Fifth Avenue, the Trump Hotel at UN Plaza, the four of the more than 500 businesses that we got documentation for, whether they actually had the same level of business coming from Saudi Arabia, the communist bureaucrats of China, who were the leading spender, as you know, if you've read our report, the United Arab Emirates, Indonesia, India, Egypt, and so on. We will make that comparison about what was done before if you get the chairman to call off the ban on further documents coming from Mazars. So
have you ever stayed at a Trump hotel, Mr. Raskin?
Excuse no, and I never would stay at a Trump hotel. I've got too much self-respect and concern for hygiene. So, but in any event, Mr. Donald, you're totally wrong about what the Foreign Emoluments Clause stands for. Abraham Lincoln was given 2 elephant tusks by the king of Siam during the Civil War, and he liked them very much. He wanted to keep them, but he went to Congress, which is what every other president did before and every president did since, right up until Donald Trump, and he asked whether he could keep the tusks, and Congress, though they loved Honest Abe, said, no, you can't keep them. I mean, John F. Kennedy was offered citizenship by the people of Ireland because they loved him so much, and he refused to take it, saying that even though it didn't violate the letter of the Emoluments Clause, it violated the spirit of the Emoluments Clause. And Donald Trump converted the presidency into an instrument for self-enrichment. He raked in millions of dollars from the most corrupt governments on earth, who came in with specific favors that we document in our report that they got from Donald Trump. I beseech my colleagues, I will read any book, any magazine, any speech you've given that you want me to read. Read this report and come back and tell me if you think Donald Trump did the right thing in converting the White House into a for-profit operation. No other president in American history has come anywhere close. And you ask why he's so determined to stay in office that he would unleash violence against his own vice president, the brother of your colleague, of our colleague. Why would he do that? It's because it was a money-making operation, and it was a great business grift for a guy who went bankrupt several times. And yet, out of some misguided partisan loyalty, you're going to stick with him. I don't even know why you stick with him. He was a Democrat longer than he was a Republican. He wanted to run for president on the Reform Party. You guys have been taken over by an absolute con man. And now you're acting like members of a religious cult who don't even remember how you got in the first place. We say return the profits, Donald Trump, $7.8 million. I've got a letter, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to share with you telling Donald Trump to return these $7.8 million. It's a small fraction of what he raked in. We want to know about the other 2 years in office. We want to know about the other businesses, not just those 4 that we were able to get information on. And we want to know about every country on earth, not just the 20 autocracies and dictatorships that we found. This is our government. This is our Constitution. And we're going to stand up for it against Donald Trump and anybody who follows him to the path of oblivion. Abraham Lincoln started your party as a third party to replace the Whigs because they wouldn't take a moral stand against slavery. It was a pro-freedom, anti-slavery, pro-union, pro-honesty party. And your party has been reduced to a corrupt, authoritarian cult of personality. And everybody does whatever Donald Trump tells them to do, which is what we're doing here today with this stupid attempt to hold Hunter Biden in contempt when he has come forward to say he will testify and give you everything you want, as the chairman of the committee repeatedly offered in public. So forgive my outrage and indignation, but enough is enough. Let's get back to the business of the people, as Ms.
Chair
Brown
recognizes
says.
Mr. Higgins for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the American people may be surprised to know some of my colleagues across the aisle hasn't served as long as we have. Might be surprised to know that Representative Raskin and I had been building quite a colleague friendship in my original years of service. Prior to J6 especially, we would visit and we would debate constitutionalist questions, and he honored me by observation of my what he would sometimes call compelling arguments, contradictory to his own. So it's with sincerity that I say congratulations to my colleague, Mr. Raskin, because you have obviously fully recovered from your cancer treatments.
Thank you, my dear friend, and I do love you.
You're quite animated, and I believe there's a direct correlation. I'm watching a live feed. The more you talk about him, the more his numbers go up. So I may yield you more time. But I would, honestly, I'd like to ask you, if I could, regarding the deposition, just from a calm, if we could take a step back from the emotion here and the political conflict and this sort of prepared for battle debate we're in here. Just regarding depositions, we've all been through depositions in one way or another. They're very cold and calculated, and you have your attorney there, and then the bad guys, who's always the other guys, they have their attorneys, and you're either being sued or you're part of a suit. You're either the defendant or the plaintiff, and you're in a room for hours until all the questions have been asked. So, sincerely, why, if you were Hunter's attorney or advisor, why would you advise him not to participate in a deposition wherein his own attorney is there? It's private and everything is transcribed. His words cannot be twisted by the fake news. Just tell us, Mr. Raskin, and I yield for your answer.
Thank you kindly. And I should tell you that your feelings are not unrequited. I still have very fond and warm feelings for you. I'm sorry that January 6th came between us, and I look forward to a day in our republic when we will be really good friends again. But in a direct answer to your question, if I were his lawyer and I were his advisor, I would never advise him not to come and testify before the committee, except for one thing. And this is why, and I started out this way.
But specifically, I'm asking about depositions.
Yes, about deposition.
Because we want the deposition first,
I would
clarify, and then the public testimony.
Just to answer your question, I would recommend it, except that they were publicly given the offer numerous times to come before the whole committee, and they state a fear on their part, which is not unreasonable, that their words will be distorted and the transcript of the interview will never be released, because the vast majority of the transcribed interviews have not been released. And I would use this as an opportunity to call on the chairman.
Let me just say that I think that's solid counsel. But that brings us to our next point, my next point, which is that as a free American, which, I mean, to a certain extent, we still have some individual rights and freedoms, including to not comply with a subpoena. But so as a free American, Hunter Biden has a right to not comply with the congressional subpoena, but we have the right to take the next step as a Congress. If we believe the subpoena was righteous and his noncompliance with that subpoena was unrighteous, if we believe that our subpoena was lawful and we have presented probable cause and lawful argument to support that subpoena, then we have not only the right, but we have the obligation to consider that he was in contempt of Congress when he took that stand of noncompliance, which is where we are right now. Doesn't have to be emotional. The man had the right to not show up. We have the right to hold him in contempt, and that's what's happening. So, by all means, as my colleagues have stated, let us move forward with the people's business. The people's business today in this committee is to move forward with the vote to hold Hunter Biden in contempt. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member wish to be heard before we begin the amendment process? Seeing none, I understand there's an amendment at the desk. Oh, Mr. Cloud. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize. Mr. Cloud from Texas for 5 minutes.
Well, in the true D.C. meeting maxim of everything's been said, but not everyone's said it, since I haven't said anything yet, I'll go ahead and mention it. But we've heard words about irrefutable evidence being presented, and, you know, I just have to say I don't think that word means what you think it means. And there's a stark contrast, as been pointed out, between how the Democrats have investigated and how we investigated. They are opposed to a closed-door deposition, which they've held a number of times. As a matter of fact, during the impeachment hearings, I sat in the skiff along with others while they withheld the transcripts that they are worried about. And so oftentimes it seems like their motivations they're portraying their motivations on us, and that's just not the case. I remember sitting, for example, in one of the hearings, and one of the witnesses who worked at the White House was asked, did the president talk to you before coming here? And said, well, we passed in the hallway and had a conversation. What did he say? Just tell the truth. Ironically, that part didn't leak from the committee hearing, but a number of lies did. And let's also look at how these two investigations got started. One was based on evidence that was false evidence that was paid for by a political opponent of Trump as a candidate, and created a whole Russian collusion narrative that we spent millions of government tax dollars on, perpetrating this big lie that our colleagues on the other side helped promote. This one began with a laptop that Hunter Biden produced himself, and then was backed up with bank documents, and then evidence of shell companies all over the place. And then there's talk about the business, the fact that Trump's business has made money from people who stay at the hotels. Is that not shocking? I think every American expected that people in other countries where some of his hotels are might have stayed at those hotels. That is not a shocking thing. But the big difference, of course, is that President Trump and his son is not manning the reservation desk. And they're not the ones answering the call and handing it over and saying, the big guy sitting with me, would you like a room at the hotel? That is not happening. But yet for these shell companies that Hunter Biden has set up and the Biden family, that's exactly what we've seen has been happening. And I would say that money that comes into the Trump organization doesn't go directly. Now, I'm sure there's some return on the investment that the Trump family has made, but it also employs several employees that get money from what comes in. I doubt that these 20 shell companies have nearly the employees of one hotel that Trump property has. Probably not as many employees as you would find in the lobby, working the lobby of one of these hotels. So this is completely different. They're trying to compare apples and oranges and confuse the American people back home. It's totally not the case. And getting back to the point of today's hearing, this really is about contempt. And so what we've seen happen is Hunter Biden has come here now twice just to not speak to this committee. So contempt is defined as a lack of respect or reverence for something, a willful disobedience or open disrespect for a court, judge, and legislative body. He flew all the way over here the day he was scheduled for a deposition just to not appear and to kind of thumb his nose here at this body. Today he showed up, and the minority is trying to make the case, well, he showed up to speak. We've been here a couple times. I've been in a couple committee hearings, not nearly as many of the members here. Never have I seen a witness show up when they want to show up on any sort of thing to say, hey, I'm here to speak on what I want to speak about. That is not how Congress works. That's not how any meeting on the Hill works. That's ridiculous to think that somebody's going to be able to show up and just mandate the agenda for today's meeting, which is further evidence of why he is holding Congress in contempt. He thinks he's above the law. He thinks it has no weight on him, and understandably so for the moment, because the DOJ refuses to follow up on anything and has done their best effort to work with the IRS and other agencies to shield and protect the Biden family. This is important. We have to hold them in contempt, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member wish to be heard before we begin the amendment process? Seeing none, I understand there's an amendment at the desk.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
For what purpose does Mr. Goldman seek recognition?
My apologies for jumping ahead. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will distribute the amendment to all members. Does everyone have the amendment? No. All right, we're going to let the clerk distribute the amendment. I believe it was changed in the last little bit.
That's okay. I would ask that the clerk read the amendment. My apologies. I withdraw.
While we're waiting for everyone to review the amendment, I'll say we had 3 hours of opening statements. So hopefully we can get through these amendments in time. Just a note, we're working on printing the amendment because we just got it.
If you want to just use the time, I can do mine. I mean, I can do mine, and most of the papers ready.